would it be fair to say that most scholars agree that the United States is a Christian country?
Yeah, certainly. From a culture aspect, absolutely. It's a Christian country, I think, from a societal norm and culture standpoint. And nationalistically, I think that's the most important way to emphasize it.
What's your take on praying in public? You know, you pray 5 times a day. You know the Quran front to back. What are your thoughts on public praying and how should we go about that?
Me personally, I don't agree with it. I don't think that it's necessary. I do think it gets to a point where it's counterintuitive and you're kind of scaring people away or making people think that you're showing off. And that's also another issue. Are you showing off? And that's a question you have to ask yourself. Of course, God knows our intentions, but that can be problematic as well from the Islamic faith. If you're showing off, that is a major, major sin.
All right, man, go ahead, bro. I'll let you just take it away.
Yeah. I have a quick monologue. I'll try to condense it as much as I can, but we discussed this the other day on the phone. And just to preface before I start, obviously I'm, relatively devout. I do take the religion pretty serious and very proud to be Muslim, but, I haven't memorized the Quran. I've read through it. I've read through a lot of the Bible. Religion does interest me. And so I do like to compare to religion and things like that. So this kind of plays into this topic, but ultimately we were discussing whether the United States is a Christian country or not. I do believe that the US is a Christian country, but in a very specific context that's really important to highlight. Obviously, the law that we use to govern our country has, you can argue it has some motivation or inspiration from the Bible or the oxymoronical term Judeo-Christian values. But I do believe the US is a Christian country because of things like WASP, right? White Anglo-Saxon Protestant men who did find this country and build it up from what it was to what it became until immigration, which is a topic that I don't really want to get into right now because it's not so PG. But the first thing that I like to go over, and right now I'm looking, sorry, I know the camera's right here, but I can see my camera here, my screen here. First thing that I like to get into is the US Constitution obviously makes no reference of, Christianity or anything like that. And there is a separation of church and state, but the culture and the societal norms that this country is founded on, this country stands for today, are more closer to Christianity than anything else. I was just telling my brother the other day, like, being a Muslim in the US does mean to some degree, you're not necessarily outcasted, but you're definitely the anomaly. And you're definitely a lot more rare to come across. I mean, even at work, when I step away to pray or anything like that, I'm bombarded with questions. And, in one instance, I remember I was praying, and this is all going to tie back, but this is just a funny example. And this is to drive my point home because I think we take this conversation too literally rather than from a general context. But I remember when I was praying in one of the rooms in my building, somebody had passed by and they thought that obviously Muslims pray like this. And they were like, they came to me later on in lunch and they were like, what were you doing? Were you thinking? I was like, wow, a lot of people have no clue about Islam or anything like that. So it's just really hard to say that this isn't a Christian country. One may argue it's a secular country, but I just disagree. And the reason for that, and something that's kind of common in Islam is the question of, meat being permissible in the United States. And anytime a scholar is asked this, like maybe Saleh al-Fawzan or a student of knowledge like Asim al-Hakim, they go on and say, well, because the United States is majority Christian, at least by culture and practice, they may not be the most religious, but they do affiliate with the religion. Their meat is halal or it's permissible. Obviously, there's a difference of opinion on this. Please, let's not get too into the weeds. It's very nuanced and a very, very debated about topic, and it's super hot. So just take that at face value. And they call the United States a Christian country. And obviously, my brother here had put up that clip on Twitter, but there's other clips that you can find on YouTube of scholars mentioning that the United States, if you have a hard time finding halal meat, maybe if you live in the Bible Belt or something like that, then you can make do with the meat that is slaughtered by the Christians or which are considered people of the book, but obviously they make up a minority of the United States as well.
Would you say the general consensus, Riyadh, is that most scholars, I guess maybe, because I know you said it's a contested topic, but would it be fair to say that most scholars agree that the United States is a Christian country?
Yeah, certainly. From a culture aspect, absolutely. And okay. I think that's the most important thing to mention is that the United States is culturally Christian, but secularly or legally it's secular. And that's a good distinction, actually.
Legally, it's secular, but culturally, it's Christian. That's a good distinction there.
Right, and that stems from the fact that Protestantism is kind of the majority denomination in this country, and what you'll find in the Protestant faith or the way they go about the religion is, I've heard many label it this way, and they don't all say this, but it's a relationship with Christ, if you will, quote unquote, rather than a religion governed by laws and things like that, which Islam very much is. Islam is a religion of course, Islam covers everything. That's why I follow Islam, because I feel like it misses no mark. But in the Christian faith, they don't really have a set of laws or anything like that. That's kind of fulfilled with the crucifixion and things of that nature. I don't want to get too in the weeds of that. But that's kind of how they go about that. So from a legal standpoint, no, it's not necessarily Christian, but from a cultural standpoint, from a societal norm standpoint, it is 100% Christian. And I think to say otherwise is a little bit disingenuous. And I think Muslims hear that and think that that means that they don't have a place here. No, obviously you have a place here.
Yeah, they get so mad, dude. That, like, they think like you're trying to like little bro them or like shit on them and be like, get out of my country or some shit like that when you say that.
Yeah, and of course, you know, the way you go about it is funny, you know, and sometimes it's a bit of rage bait and they get mad, but it's true. I mean, it's not a Muslim country, that's for certain. I'm not going to mention the other religion right now. I was going to make a joke, but we're on YouTube. But
no, we ain't on YouTube, nigga. You can say what you want. I already know.
And might I also mention,
Chat, all I'm going to say is aware. He's very aware. Okay, we're on the internet, nigga. Like, I'm not going to have my brother jam himself up. You know, I'm going to tell him to shut the hell up, but he's aware. That's all I got to say. Well, go ahead.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's a Christian country, I think, from a societal norm and culture standpoint. And nationalistically, I think that's the most important way to emphasize it. And I think that's the most accurate way to describe it. Of course, Islam has a law that governs its countries, like in the UAE or so on and so forth. And
do they follow strict Sharia? UAE? Probably not, right?
They do follow a form of Sharia.
Okay.
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
They follow pretty much Saudi, the UAE, and many of those Gulf countries do follow the Sharia law.
Are they cutting hands off if you steal?
It works.
But are they cutting hands off if you stealing shit? Like that type Sharia?
So Sharia is all dependent on what a ruler is going to say. So there's no one size fits all kind of answer. If somebody steals for a really petty or stupid reason, then potentially that could be the punishment. But if somebody's stealing because, let's say, they're hungry, or somebody's stealing because of, you know, I don't want to say a justified reason, but a lot closer of a justified reason than a kind of violent and unexplainable reason, then in that case, it's brought to the court, to the ruler, and then he makes a decision based on the context surrounding that. And that's how Sharia works. It's not a one size, like, if this guy is, you know, homosexual, we throw him off a building. Like, that's not how it works, and that's a common misconception from a lot of Westerners as well.
Can you clarify for them? What do they do with people then? Can you clarify to them? Because that is a lie that they say they throw them off buildings. That's not true at all.
Yeah, it's not true. I mean, look, there is a difference of opinion in regards to how to govern Muslim countries. You obviously have a little bit more of a rigid Islam, which is Salafiyya, which is kind of like the, you know, righteous predecessors, if you will. And I think probably one of the more authentic ways to go about the religion, they're not throwing gay people off the building. And look, if you're gay in a Middle Eastern country, you don't say you're gay. You'd have to be really stupid to do that. And you're not outwardly gay. And the UAE is very strict on enforcing that. As we saw Qatar when they were hosting people for their sports events, you know, they weren't playing that. They're like, hey, look, you could be gay all you want, have your boyfriend or have your girlfriend if you're a girl, whatever it is, but don't show that and don't be outwardly expressive about it.
No PDA.
Bare minimum ask, yeah. And so if there's speculation that you're gay, you're not like brought to this council where they're like, all right, we're throwing you off of a 40-foot building. That's not how it works. Rather, public display of affection, especially in a homosexual manner, can result in imprisonment or fine or something like that. But no throwing off buildings. Yeah, that's a funny misconception and just, you know, Western mythology, but it is kind of funny. It's just not true though. It's not true.
Okay.
And then the compatibility, to tie it all together, the compatibility of Islam and I guess Western culture. I mean, look, Muslims can assimilate here and they have done that for hundreds of years. And I think that they've done that in a relatively successful manner. We're really not barging in or intruding when it comes to American culture in a really bombastic or obvious way. Obviously, you have Michigan and you have I was going to say Somalia. Oh my God. You have Minnesota.
Yeah.
And, you know, I can understand why somebody who is on the right and somebody who might be white is upset by that or bothered by that. And so that's totally understandable. And I think it is important for Muslims to assimilate to some degree. And, you know, the whole Times Square issue.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on, what's your take on praying in public from someone, you know, you pray 5 times a day, you know the Quran front to back, you probably know more surahs than all these niggas talking shit to me on Twitter. What are your thoughts on public praying and how should we go about that?
Yeah, so I mean, look, there's many aspects to it, but to cover it with a blanket, I do think that it's a little bit counterintuitive to pray in a place like Times Square. Obviously, I believe when they were praying, it was Ramadan, and so they have the night prayer called Tarawih, in which they pray for it.
Yo, you want me to show you the video, bro? Did you see the video?
Yeah, I've seen all the videos on X and everything like that. So, yeah, and look, me personally, I don't agree with it. I don't think that it's necessary. I think that New York is one of the places that actually has a lot of masjids. There's plenty of masajid and plenty of room for people to pray. I did hear some people saying that there weren't room in masjids that day. I don't really believe that. I don't think that's the case because for the last however many said years, I didn't see us praying in Times Square. So I think there was room in masajid. I think it's
Bro,
You know,
New York
something
City has
like
like
this.
masjids everywhere, bro. There's a lot of Muslims that live in.
Yeah, New York City, I believe, has one of the highest Muslim populations in the United States, if not the highest for that matter. So without a shadow of a doubt, I don't think that it was smart. There is scholarly consensus and, you know, a lot of valid scholarly opinion from legitimate scholars like Salih ibn Uthaymeen, who say that praying in public, especially in the street, if you're blocking traffic or if there are lights distracting or anything like that, that's makruh. It's not haram or anything like that. I don't want to get into halal and haram because that's not what it is, but it's makruh, meaning it's disliked. So it's not really
Oh,
preferred.
another thing for you niggas. My brother is a fluent Arab speaker as well. Okay? So, you know, ما عربيكم مكسر زي أنا.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak better than you, that's for sure.
Yeah,
You're getting better, though.
Yeah, it's
You're
just
getting
trash,
better.
bro. It's trash.
You're getting better.
I got to work with the.
I was impressed the other day when you were speaking for a second.
That's a practice.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry. Keep going, bro. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's disliked to pray in a roadway or block traffic or anything like that. Now, one might argue no one's driving through Times Square. People weren't bothered. That's fine, but there's still lights everywhere. There's still people everywhere. I think it's more appropriate to pray in a masjid. Not only that, but I think Muslims have this idea like, oh, this is da'wah. And sure, you may think that. And, you know, I would think that they're innocent in thinking that Muslims want to invite everybody to the religion. And so do Christians. They evangelize very hard and they're in the streets. And that's kind of how we all want everybody to like our religion and see it. But I do think it gets to a point where it's counterintuitive and you're kind of scaring people away or making people think that you're showing off. And that's also another issue. Are you showing off? And that's a question you have to ask yourself. Of course, God knows our intentions, but that can be problematic as well from the Islamic faith. If you're showing off, that is a major, major sin. So I thought that it was a bad idea. I'm not really in favor of it.
So that's an important distinction. So you can make the argument then that when people are praying in Times Square or in front of the Empire State Building or some place of Western significance, that can be interpreted as showing off.
Yeah, I mean, to somebody viewing it, they might think it's showing off from the.
Because let's be honest, bro. Me and you talked about this many times. Whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's asserting dominance. Like whether they mean to or not, it's gonna come off that way to Christians and to other people that are there. And I look at it like, bro, this isn't our country. Why are you doing that? You know what I mean? If 50 Christians line up in front of the Burj Khalifa, UAE, right, and they want to pray, what's gonna happen?
Yeah, they'll be pushed out of there.
I went to out of, right? Like we know what's gonna happen. Like
yeah, they'll be pushed out of there.
That's a super westernized
Western.
Muslim country, and they'll tell them get out of here.
Yeah. Look, if Christians did a public demonstration, and they don't have a prayer like ours where they kind of have these ways to go about it. It's a lot more nuanced. But if Christians did have a very large demonstration in a, you know, iconic Middle Eastern place like the Burj Khalifa, for example, I definitely think that would have lasted a long time.
And the other important thing is the Burj Khalifa has no religious significance. It's their Empire State Building. Like,
yeah, exactly.
If I was to take apples to apples, we take 100 Muslims, have them pray in front of the Empire State Building, versus I take 100 Christians and have them pray in front of the Burj Khalifa, there's going to be problems with the Christians. They're going to get, at bare minimum, they're going to tell them, get out of here.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a perfect example and analogy. I think that is very analogous to the situation in Times Square. And look, whether they're showing off or not, to touch on what you asked me prior to that, you know, anyone can make the argument that they are, they aren't. What I'm saying is it's counterintuitive because it could come off that way. And now the da'wah is ineffective. And I do think that Islam is obviously the fastest growing religion anyways. I don't really see the need or the desire for a demonstration like that or to pray in Times Square. I do feel like, you know, and not only that, you're khushu' and being focused. I don't know if it's all there.
Whoa, what was that word you used? Say that again to the, remember, these guys don't speak Arabic. Go ahead.
Yeah, khushu' or your focus. So that's one of the aspects or the pillars of prayer that I've spoken about, where you want to be very focused in your prayer. You want to make sure that you're in an area of solitary or quietness. So I don't know if Times Square is the best place for that. So that's why I make that argument. And I come at it from a different angle. And yeah, I mean, there might be people, New York is very liberal. So New York is not the best example, but you know, there are people who might think like, yo, this is a display of domination or control or power. So it can be an issue from that point as well. And look, us Muslims make up a very, very small percentage of the United States. So the whole, like, they're taking over. Obviously, we know it's Hasbara, but we do have to play our part too and be a little bit careful about how we do these things in order to avert the condemnation or the feeling of being condemned. Because, yo, it's unfortunate, but a white culture is kind of dying and the white birth rate is low. And so when they see these things, they're like, yo, we got to lock in. And we're kind of like already poking the bear. And I want to rather just like keep it where we are and keep our religions to ourselves. And we can do dawah and we can do tables, but the public prayer with the speaker could be a little bit more problematic. And that's when things gain some friction and become an issue. So that's my stance on that. And the compatibility with Western culture, again, obviously any Muslim country is governed by Islam, right? Islam has rules set out for Muslim countries and how to go about banking and trading, and the Quran goes into all of this. So that's all covered. Whereas Western culture, it's a lot more, just to generalize it, because I don't want to go on a tangent, but to generalize it, Western culture is a lot more like the majority decides, rules are secular, what makes the most sense for the people, more so capitalism and things like that. So those things, of course, are incompatible. Islam is very, very different than the West, and neither are compatible with one another when it comes to governing, obviously culture, but you can argue that any culture doesn't really fit in here because American culture is its own thing. But certainly, yeah, from that standpoint, it wouldn't be compatible with the West. And you went on in your tweets to even mention gambling, the sex industry, alcohol, all these things are strictly prohibited in Islam. And sure, Christianity doesn't allow it as well, but Protestantism is quite loose. And, the topic of alcohol can be debated and things like that. So it definitely is counterintuitive to what an Islamic country would look like, or a Sharia compliant country would look like. And the United States couldn't be farther from that, with all of the haramery we have in Miami or Las Vegas or even New York City, man. I take a stroll around New York City. I'm like 40 minutes outside of New York, and it's super secular. Leftist media defends Islam all the time, which, like, thanks, but the things they do are super haram as well. And everybody's supporting Mamdani, but Mamdani is he's a supporter of LGBTQ and stuff like that, which from the Islamic faith is not allowed. Of course, it's not even debatable. So you also have that nuance as well. It's like, yeah, there is some heat from the right going towards Islam, but it's also like, hey, the left is doing very problematic things that are super against our religion. I think it's important that Muslims stay consistent on both sides. I see a lot of Muslims left-leaning, when in reality we should be leaning in the direction of our religion. And that would actually be closer to conservative or traditional values in many instances. Not in all, of course, but in many instances it's closer. So that's what I have to say about that. But yeah, that's really it to tie it all together. I don't know if there's anything else I kind of missed, but that's kind of that tweet broken down in a little bit more of a scientific
they're saying Mamdani is Shia, which I don't know if you want to go into that.
And also, I mean, the nigga's a Shia, bro. So if you're a Muslim and you're a Sunni Muslim and you do respect your faith or your creed in your sect, then you should be offended by the fact that a Shia just won that election. I mean, I don't want to get too into the nitty gritty here, but from the Sunni perspective, and look, at the Shia watching, I don't want to offend anybody, but the Shia belief is incredibly heretical and it's very problematic. And the things that they believe, I don't even know if I want to say. To me, the way I view it, they're a very big issue to our religion to make us look bad. I mean, these are the same people that are beating themselves in the street in Iran and Iraq, and these are the same individuals that have very, very distorted beliefs and skew the Quran and the Sunnah, which is Prophet's tradition, and they skew that up to a mile. So without a shadow of a doubt, I mean, I'll be honest, that was the first thing that ruled him out for me. I was like, yo, the nigga's a Shia. I would never vote for him, even if I lived in New York City. But his policies as well, of course, I don't believe in socialism, and as well as the fact that he sympathizes with ideologies that I don't believe with. He's a Shia, bro. So if you're a Sunni Muslim and you're supporting him, you should really go and double take as to what Shias believe in and why there cannot be.
Does it go further
in the United States?
Because a lot of people, right, especially like in Western media, the general consensus is they don't agree with the lineage, right, of who takes over after the prophet. Is there other things that are problematic with it? I guess if you want to explain it to the people.
Yeah, so
someone in the chat said they're kuffars. I don't think it's that far though.
So there is a scholarly consensus by a lot of Salafi scholars that
well, Salafis are the crazy ones, aren't they? Aren't they the most rigid?
Yeah, they're the rigid ones, and not all of them are crazy. Actually, Salafiyya is the very non-violent kind of sect of belief in Islam, where they don't do anything without permission of the ruler. And so you don't see a lot of backlash or things coming out of the Salafi movement that are violent, and that's because they don't move without authoritative rule. And that's one of the kind of pillars of Salafiyya. So yeah, they're very rigid and they're very strict, but I don't think they're as crazy as people paint them out to be. Okay. Now, of course, you will see all the extremist factions coming out of the Middle East and these Israeli augmented countries being Salafi, but of course that's up for debate for obvious reasons. That's a different topic. Yeah, in terms of what the Shia believe, they believe in the Khilafah, or the people taking over, the Prophet's successors being in a different order. They believe that Ali, who was the cousin's prophet, should have taken over from the get-go instead of it being Abu Bakr, and then Umar ibn Khattab, and then the third one, Uthman. And then after that was Ali, but they believe it was in the wrong order. And they believe that these people who played a very big role in spreading Islam to places like Jerusalem and China and things like this, They believe that these individuals backstab the prophet and that they're not Muslims. Not only that, but they curse the prophet's wives and say that they were adulterers and that they were, God forgive me. So that's just the tip of the iceberg as to why the problematic belief with Shias does not allow me to believe we can build a coalition with them. And until the day comes where the stakes get high enough, I don't think that it's an appropriate time to do that, especially in the United States. So that's why I'm really not a fan of anybody who's a Shia in terms of them governing our politics. And the last person that I would ever vote for is Mamdani, especially since he's a socialist. And I don't even need to get into why that's problematic. I don't really believe in that, but yeah, that's kind of some of the reasons.
To make things simple for you guys, without getting my brother in trouble, basically he agrees with me politically on almost everything. Yeah, I'll just keep it at that. I won't really go too much further. You know what? I'll have it where I'm sure these guys probably have questions for you, Riyadh. And shout out to you, man. Brave as hell coming on stream.